Hello, it's Christine from The Ordinary Sacred, and this video is going to be an overview about internal family systems, which is a therapeutic technique that I have found incredibly healing and life-giving for myself and for many of my coaching clients. And so I want to share an overview of it. I was telling someone, it's like a combination of everything that I have learned and experienced in my life, everything that has been helpful. It is inner child work, reparenting, it is curious and compassionate witness, it's nonviolent communication applied to your internal world. And it's incredibly effective at healing trauma and healing wounds, deep wounds, old wounds, so that we can free up our energy to do the things that we really want to do. So before I focus on this little handy dandy thing in the background, I wanted to give you a background about IFS, internal family systems. So the man who developed internal family systems, his name is Richard Schwartz, and he developed it in the 1980s. Just basically, he was taught it by his clients. So he started as a family therapist, a family systems therapist. So he would deal with families and the individuals and how they related to each other, the patterns they had, the roles they took on. But at some point, he started working with women with eating disorders, and he started noticing that the way the women talked, it was like they had an internal family. They had all these parts, and that was the language that the women used. They would say, well, part of me feels this pain and then wants to numb it, so it binges and eats a lot. And then there's this critic part that comes and, chastises me and tells me I'm a fat pig, and then I purge, and then I feel so awful and, weak and shamed and in pain that then the cycle continues. And so as he heard them talk about these parts, he thought they're just like an inner family. And so he was just experimenting. And at first what he would do, especially with these kind of extreme parts that were either self-harming or self-critical, is he would try to kind of talk back to them and say, you stop it, just try to get rid of them. And he found that their response was just that they would get bigger and they would react and cause more harm. So he finally just gave up and said, gosh, what do you want? You win, and then the parts would start explaining their good intention. And he found that every single part, even the ones that seemed like they were wreaking havoc, had some kind of good intention for the person, and that they were often stuck in an earlier time, protecting that person in a time of trauma. And so once he could really understand them and appreciate them, he could then gain access to the exile, which is the person in the traumatic situation, and go in and help that part to be healed, and then releasing the part that was protecting it from its role. As he worked with these women, he found, just like in family systems, that if they were arguing back and forth, the different parts, that he would need to talk to one at a time. So he would ask parts, can you step aside and wait your turn? And he found that they would oblige, and he could then talk to one specific part. But sometimes there would be so many parts, he would have to keep asking, can you step aside? Can you step aside? And he found with every single client that he worked with, that once all the parts had stepped aside, he was always left with this part that was curious and compassionate and kind and clear and confident. And so he would ask the women, what part is this? And he said, without fail, every time the women would say, this is not a part, this is just my true self. So he started calling that the self with a capital S. And I'll show you the qualities back there of the self. But he also found that as the therapist, all he had to do was help the person connect to the self. And it was that self, the compassionate, curious witness, that would heal the other parts and unburden them from their traumas, from the roles they were stuck in. And then they could be free to have energy to do the things that they loved. So that's a little bit of background on how he developed it. It's incredibly fascinating. But if you look here, I will show you the basic, most important parts of IFS. So internal family systems is often called IFS. So the self is the main part. It is your true self. It's what some would call your imago Dei, your divine nature. But these are the qualities, the 8 C's. It's always curious, compassionate, clear, calm, confident, courageous, creative, and connected. And then the parts, there's 2 different kinds of parts. There are protectors and there are exiles. So, and then there are 2 types of protectors, managers and firefighters. Managers are proactive and firefighters are reactive. So what that means is that a manager is going to try to inhibit behavior and get you to not get into a sticky situation, not get pain to come up. Whereas a firefighter, the pain has already come up from the exile, from the wounded part, and now it's reacting to it and trying to escape it or numb it. So you can see with the examples here, examples of the manager is the critic, the performer, the reframer, the helper, the researcher, the clown, right? These are all ways of trying to manage pain and difficult emotion and beliefs. So the firefighters, though, are more reactive. And so that would be things like addiction, escape, distraction, rage, hypersexuality, self-harm. So these are all ways to kind of try to numb the pain, and they react kind of in extreme ways. And what they're doing is they're trying to protect you as the self from being flooded by difficult emotion and belief, or they're trying to protect the exiles from coming up and flooding the system and feeling all of these very strong feelings and beliefs. And the exiles are often young. The protectors can be very young as well, but the exiles are often young and stuck in earlier trauma. It doesn't have to be childhood. It can be, you can be older and have trauma as well, but they're often very young and they've been there with you for a long time. And they can be things like terror, loneliness, shame, and then messages that we've internalized, like I'm unlovable, I'm ugly, I'm stupid, I'm too much, I'm not enough, those kinds of things. And those are core wounds that we have that are based on specific trauma, or they can also be what's called legacy wounds. I'm going to come back over here. So that's just an overview of internal family systems, and I am going to offer a free course to explain, just open to anyone, to explain how to use internal family systems with yourself, or how to be guided to go into your internal world and really get to know these parts so that they can be healed and they can be unburdened. And then after that, I'm going to start a course and a support group in internal family systems for people who really want to dig deep and do this work and heal themselves, and just to not be alone, to have others that they're walking through this with. So look forward to that, and let me know if you have any questions.